My daughter stood up in the middle of my 62nd birthday dinner, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Mom, maybe you should leave before you ruin the night for everyone else." The entire restaurant went silent. I remember gripping my purse so tightly my fingers hurt while strangers stared at me with pity. My son-in-law Derek wouldn't even look at me. And my own daughter, my Vanessa, the little girl I raised alone after her father died, sat there like I was some embarrassment she needed removed. I walked out of my own birthday dinner fighting tears. What I didn't know then was that the humiliation was only the beginning, and that my family had already been planning something far worse behind my back. Before we continue, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever been deeply hurt by someone you trusted with your whole heart? And where are you watching from tonight? I always read your comments because they remind me none of us are truly alone in what we survive. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these journeys together. After my husband Harold died 8 years ago, people kept telling me the same thing. "You're strong, Ruth." I smiled every time they said it, but the truth was I never felt strong. I felt lonely. Harold had been the steady center of my life since I was 23 years old. We built our little world together in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. We bought our modest brick house when Vanessa was only 2 years old, and over the decades, every inch of it became filled with memories. The kitchen still had faint scratches on the wooden cabinets from when Vanessa used to ride her toy cars across them. The hallway still creaked near the stairs because Harold never got around to fixing it. And every spring, the tulips Harold planted beside the mailbox bloomed like clockwork, as if he were still quietly taking care of us somehow. When he passed from pancreatic cancer, the silence inside that house nearly swallowed me whole. Vanessa became my lifeline after that. She called every morning before work. Every Sunday she came over for dinner. Sometimes we would sit at my kitchen table for hours drinking tea and talking about everything from television shows to old family stories. There were nights she fell asleep on my couch just because neither of us wanted to be alone. Back then, I truly believed grief had brought us closer. Then she met Derek Carter. At first, I was relieved. Vanessa had spent years putting her own life on hold while helping me through Harold's illness. I wanted her to find happiness. I wanted someone to love her the way Harold had loved me. And honestly, Derek seemed perfect in the beginning. He was polished, confident, the kind of man who always knew exactly what to say. He worked in financial consulting downtown and wore expensive watches that caught the light whenever he moved his hands. He brought wine to dinner, complimented my cooking, and called me Miss Ruth with that smooth, charming smile of his. But even early on, there was something about him that made me uneasy. Not enough to accuse him of anything, just little things. Small moments that sat heavy in my chest afterward. The first time was during a barbecue in my backyard. Harold had been gone less than a year then. Derek stood beside me near the garden while Vanessa was inside getting drinks. "This neighborhood's getting expensive," he said casually, glancing toward the street. "Homes around here are worth a fortune now." I shrugged. "I suppose. You ever think about downsizing?" I laughed softly. "This house is all I've got left of Harold." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, he said sometimes memories can keep people stuck." Something about the way he said it chilled me. Not long after that, he began asking more questions. Had Harold left a will? Did I have retirement savings? Was the mortgage fully paid off? Did I have long-term care insurance? Each question came wrapped in concern, but eventually I noticed a pattern. Derek was always circling around money. Vanessa brushed it off whenever I mentioned it. "That's just how he thinks, Mom. He's practical." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was becoming suspicious in my old age, but the distance between us started growing after the wedding, slowly at first, then all at once. Vanessa stopped calling every morning, then every week. Our Sunday dinners became once a month, then once every few months. Whenever I invited them over, Derek usually had an excuse. We're busy. Work's crazy. Maybe next week. Sometimes Vanessa sounded nervous on the phone, like she was speaking carefully, like someone was listening nearby. One afternoon, I drove to their house unannounced because Vanessa hadn't answered my calls in 3 days. I brought homemade chicken soup because she'd mentioned feeling sick earlier that week. When Derek opened the door, surprise flashed across his face for half a second before the smile returned. "Ruth," he said. "You should have called first." I laughed awkwardly. I was just worried. Vanessa appeared behind him, and for a moment I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders tense. The bright warmth she used to carry around her was fading. "Oh," she said quietly, "you didn't have to come." That hurt more than I expected, not because of the words themselves, but because my daughter used to run into my arms the second she saw me. Now she barely hugged me at all. While we sat in their kitchen, Derek talked almost nonstop. About investments, about interest rates, about protecting assets. Then suddenly he turned toward me. "You know, he said casually, you should really think about setting up a trust someday." I blinked. A trust for the house. Retirement accounts. Medical decisions. That kind of thing. Vanessa stared down at her coffee cup the entire time. I tried to joke my way out of the conversation. "Derek, I'm only 62, not 92. He chuckled, but again there was something cold behind it. "You'd be surprised how quickly things can happen." That sentence stayed with me long after I drove home. Over the next year, the changes in Vanessa became impossible to ignore. She canceled lunch dates, forgot birthdays, missed holidays. Even when we were together, she seemed distracted, anxious, almost guilty. One Christmas Eve, I found her crying quietly in my bathroom. I rushed toward her immediately. "Honey, what's wrong?" She wiped her face quickly. "Nothing. I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Before she could answer, Derek appeared in the hallway. "There you are," he said sharply. Vanessa straightened instantly, like a child caught doing something wrong. The moment passed so quickly I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But later that night, my older sister Linda pulled me aside in the kitchen. Linda had always been blunt, the kind of woman who could read a room in 30 seconds flat. She lowered her voice. "You need to watch that husband of hers," I frowned. "Why would you say that?" "Because every time money comes up, his eyes light up like a slot machine." I sighed. "Linda." "No, listen to me." She leaned closer. "That man doesn't love your daughter. He studies people, especially vulnerable ones." I hated hearing that, not because I thought she was wrong, but because part of me feared she might be right. Still, I pushed the thought away. What mother wants to believe her daughter married the wrong man? What mother wants to admit she may already be losing her child? A few weeks before my birthday dinner, Vanessa finally called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded strangely cheerful. "Mom, she said we want to take you somewhere special for your birthday this year." I smiled despite everything. "You do?" "Of course. 62 is important." I laughed softly. "Since when?" "Just let us celebrate you." For the first time in months, she sounded almost like herself again, and foolishly, I let myself hope. Hope that maybe the distance between us had only been temporary. Hope that whatever tension had been growing would finally disappear. Hope that my daughter still needed me the way I needed her. I had no idea that dinner would become the worst night of my life. The night of my birthday dinner, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror longer than I had in years. At 62, I didn't spend much time worrying about my appearance anymore. Most days, I tied my gray blonde hair into a loose bun, wore comfortable sweaters, and focused more on surviving loneliness than impressing anyone. But that evening felt different. Important. I carefully curled my hair for the first time in months. I even wore lipstick Harold used to love, the soft rose-colored one he always claimed made me look dangerously beautiful even in my 50s. As I fastened my pearl earrings, my eyes drifted toward Harold's photograph on the dresser. "I wish you were here," I whispered. Somehow talking to his picture still comforted me. I picked up the silver necklace he gave me on our 30th anniversary, a tiny heart-shaped pendant with a sapphire in the center, and clasped it around my neck. For a moment, I almost felt happy again. Vanessa had sounded so warm on the phone earlier that week. Hope is a dangerous thing when you've been lonely for too long. It makes you ignore warning signs you'd normally never miss. The restaurant Derek chose sat downtown near the riverfront. It was one of those expensive places with dim golden lighting, white tablecloths, and waiters who spoke softly like they were inside a church. The kind of place Harold and I could never really afford when we were younger. When I arrived, I spotted Vanessa near the entrance immediately. She looked beautiful in a dark green dress, but something about her face made my stomach tighten. She looked nervous, not excited, not happy, nervous. The second she hugged me, I felt how stiff her body was. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said quietly. "Thank you, sweetheart." I pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile too quickly. "Of course." Before I could ask anything else, Derek appeared beside us. "There's the birthday girl," he said brightly. He kissed my cheek with practiced charm, but his eyes were distracted, restless, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Inside the private dining room, several relatives were already seated. My cousin Elaine waved enthusiastically. My nephew Jordan stood to hug me, and at the far end of the table sat my older sister Linda, watching the room with narrowed eyes. The moment she saw me, she gave me a look I couldn't quite understand. Concern. Maybe even warning. I tried to shake the feeling off. Tonight was supposed to be special. I didn't want my anxiety ruining it. The waiter poured wine while everyone exchanged small talk, but the atmosphere felt strangely heavy. Conversations kept dying halfway through. People avoided eye contact. Even the laughter sounded forced. Derek checked his phone constantly beneath the table. Every few minutes, the screen lit up in his hand. At one point, Vanessa leaned toward him and whispered something sharply. He responded without even looking at her. Whatever was happening between them, it wasn't good. Linda eventually slid into the empty seat beside me. "You look beautiful," she whispered. I smiled. "Thank you." Then her expression darkened slightly. "You sure you're okay?" I blinked. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because this whole thing feels strange. I glanced around the table. "What do you mean?" Linda lowered her voice. "Your daughter looks like she's about to walk into court instead of celebrate your birthday." I tried to laugh it off, but unease crawled deeper into my chest. Dinner began, and for a while I convinced myself maybe I was imagining everything. The appetizers arrived. People chatted. Jordan told funny stories about his kids. I even caught Vanessa smiling once or twice. But then little details kept pulling my attention back. Derek disappeared twice to take phone calls. Each time he returned, he looked more irritated. And once when he set his leather portfolio bag beside his chair, it accidentally fell open slightly. I only saw it for a second. A stack of papers, official-looking documents, tabs, signatures. Before I could look closer, Derek quickly shut the bag. His eyes met mine for one brief moment. Cold, guarded, almost angry. "You okay there, Ruth?" he asked. I smiled awkwardly. Of course. But my heartbeat had already quickened. Later, while everyone was distracted by dessert menus, I leaned toward Vanessa. "Honey, are you sure everything's all right?" She stared at the tablecloth. "Why wouldn't it be? You just seem tense." Her jaw tightened. "I'm fine, Mom." That answer hurt more than she probably realized. There was a time Vanessa told me everything. After her first heartbreak in high school, she cried in my lap for hours. When she got rejected from her dream college at 18, we sat on the kitchen floor eating ice cream straight from the carton together. After Harold died, she slept in my bed for nearly a week because neither of us could handle being alone. Now, every conversation with my daughter felt like knocking on a locked door. The waiter arrived carrying my birthday cake. Everyone clapped politely. But again, something felt wrong. Too rehearsed. Too careful. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she held her wine glass. Derek stared at her intensely from across the table, almost like he was silently reminding her of something. Then Linda leaned close to me again. "Ruth," she murmured. "I don't trust this." I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" Before she could answer, Derek suddenly stood. "Well," he announced, loudly lifting his glass, "I think it's time we say a few words about the birthday girl." Everyone quieted immediately, and I do mean immediately, like they'd all been waiting for this moment. Something icy slid through my stomach. Derek smiled warmly at the table. "When Vanessa and I planned tonight, we thought it would be a good opportunity not just to celebrate Ruth," he paused, "but also to address some things that have been weighing heavily on this family." My pulse stopped. I looked toward Vanessa. Her face had gone pale. "Derek," she whispered. But he kept going. At some point, difficult conversations become necessary. The room felt smaller suddenly, harder to breathe inside. I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, that sounds ominous." No one laughed back. Not one person. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Jordan wouldn't look at me. Elaine looked uncomfortable. Even the waiter standing near the wall seemed tense, as if people already knew something I didn't. Derek reached into his portfolio bag slowly. And that was when Linda's hand suddenly gripped my wrist under the table. Hard! I turned toward her in confusion. Her face looked genuinely frightened. "Ruth," she whispered urgently, "whatever happens next, don't sign anything." A sharp ringing filled my ears. I stared at her. "What?" But before she could explain, Derek cleared his throat loudly and pulled several papers from the folder in front of everyone. Vanessa looked like she might burst into tears. And in that exact moment, I realized this dinner had never really been about my birthday at all. The moment Derek pulled those papers from his bag, the entire room changed. I can still remember the sound the pages made as he spread them carefully across the tablecloth. Soft, precise, deliberate, like he had rehearsed this. I looked toward Vanessa again, desperate for some explanation, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around her wine glass, trembling so badly I thought it might shatter in her hand. Derek cleared his throat. I think everyone here knows how much Vanessa and I care about Ruth. A few uncomfortable nods circled the table. I stared at him in disbelief. What was happening? We've been worried for a while now, he continued gently, almost sadly. And honestly, tonight seemed like the best time to finally have this conversation as a family. My chest tightened. Conversation about what Derek gave me, a sympathetic smile that immediately made my skin crawl. Your behavior? Silence. Absolute silence. I actually laughed at first because the sentence sounded so absurd. My behavior? Vanessa closed her eyes briefly like she physically couldn't bear to hear this. Derek folded his hands together. Ruth, people have noticed changes. What changes? You've become forgetful. Linda scoffed loudly beside me. Oh, give me a break. But Derek kept talking smoothly, calmly, like some television therapist pretending to help a difficult patient. You isolate yourself. I'm a widow, I snapped. Not a criminal. You get emotional easily. My face burned hot. Because my husband died. He sighed heavily, performing concern for the audience around us. And lately Vanessa's been under enormous stress trying to take care of you. I turned toward my daughter so fast my chair scraped the floor. Vanessa, tears were already sliding down her cheeks, but she still wouldn't look at me, and suddenly for the first time that night, genuine fear began creeping into my body. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, carefully, thoroughly. Mom. Vanessa whispered shakily. We're just worried about you. My mouth fell open. Worried about me? Derek leaned forward. Last month you forgot where you left your keys. I stared at him. Everybody forgets where they leave their keys. You also repeated the same story twice during Easter dinner. Linda let out a sharp laugh. Oh my God. Are you serious? But now Derek had momentum. And Vanessa told me you've been having mood swings. Mood swings, I repeated. Vanessa finally spoke louder. You cry all the time, Mom. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, because they were partially true. After Harold died, there were days grief still ambushed me out of nowhere. A song in the grocery store, an empty chair at church, the smell of his old flannel shirts. I never realized my daughter had been quietly turning my grief into evidence against me. Derek slid one of the papers toward me. We think it might be time to discuss some support options. I glanced down. Medical authorization. My stomach dropped. Then another page. Power of attorney. My blood turned cold. I looked up slowly. What is this? Derek kept his voice calm. These are just precautionary measures. You brought legal documents to my birthday dinner. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. Nobody defended me. Nobody. Vanessa wiped her tears. Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is. Harder! Harder! I felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. You think I'm mentally incompetent. No one said that, Derek replied quickly. But that's exactly what you're implying. He sighed dramatically again like I was exhausting him. Ruth, your reactions lately have become unpredictable. Linda suddenly slammed her hand against the table. The only thing unpredictable here is this psychotic ambush. Several people jumped. Derek's expression hardened briefly before the fake sympathy returned. We're trying to help. No, Linda snapped. You're trying to control her. I turned toward Vanessa desperately. Sweetheart, tell me this isn't real. That finally broke her composure. She burst into tears. I can't do this anymore. Every head in the room turned toward her. Vanessa pressed trembling hands against her face. "You make everything harder, Mom." The sentence cut straight through me. "What?" "You always need something emotionally," she cried. "You always make me feel guilty." I stared at her like I didn't recognize her voice. "This is because I call you once a week. You don't understand how overwhelming you are." Derek placed a comforting hand on her shoulder immediately. Protective. Possessive. Like he'd been waiting for this exact emotional explosion. "You see what she's been carrying," he told the room softly, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about legal papers. This was about creating a performance, an image, a narrative. The unstable emotional mother, the exhausted daughter, the concerned son-in-law trying to save the family. I could practically see the story they wanted everyone to believe. My hands began shaking. "Vanessa," I whispered, "where is this coming from?" But Derek answered for her. "She's been afraid to tell you the truth for years. Don't speak for my daughter. She feels trapped." That word shattered something inside me. Trapped by me. I spent 38 years loving that girl with everything I had. I worked double shifts at the library when Harold got sick. I sold my jewelry to help pay Vanessa's college tuition. I sat beside her hospital bed all night when she had pneumonia at 12 years old. I gave that child every piece of myself. And now I was sitting in a restaurant while strangers watched my daughter describe me like some burden destroying her life. "I think you should leave," Derek said quietly. I looked at him in disbelief. "What?" "You're upsetting Vanessa." I laughed again, but this time it sounded broken even to my own ears. "This is my birthday dinner." Vanessa stood suddenly, her mascara streaked down her face. "Mom," she whispered. Then she said the sentence I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. "Please just leave before you ruin everything." The room went dead silent. I felt dozens of eyes staring at me. Pity, discomfort, embarrassment. I looked around the table desperately waiting for someone, anyone to say this had gone too far. Nobody did. Jordan stared at the table. Elaine looked away. Even Linda seemed frozen in shock. I realized then that humiliation physically hurts. My chest ached so badly I could barely breathe. My ears rang. My hands went numb. And somehow, despite all of it, the only thing I could think was, how did we get here? I stood slowly. Nobody moved to stop me. Derek gathered the papers calmly while avoiding my eyes now, because the performance was over. He had already gotten what he wanted. I picked up my purse carefully, terrified my hands would shake too visibly. Vanessa was crying openly now, but she still didn't come toward me. She didn't hug me, didn't apologize, didn't even say goodbye. As I walked toward the restaurant exit, I heard whispers rising quietly behind me. The hostess avoided looking directly at me. Near the front door, a younger waitress touched my arm gently. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. That nearly broke me completely. Outside, the cold night air hit my face hard. The parking lot blurred through my tears. I reached my car, climbed inside, and locked the doors immediately. Then I finally collapsed. A sound came out of me I had never heard before. Not crying, not sobbing, something deeper. The sound a person makes when their heart cracks open in real time. I pressed both hands over my mouth and cried harder than I had even at Harold's funeral, because death is cruel, but betrayal from your own child that destroys something much more permanent. And while I sat there shaking in the dark parking lot, I still had no idea that the worst part of the night hadn't even happened yet. I don't know how long I sat crying in that parking lot. 10 minutes, maybe 30. Time stopped making sense after a while. Cars came and went around me while I sat frozen behind the steering wheel, humiliated and shaking so hard I could barely breathe properly. Every few seconds, another piece of the dinner replayed itself in my mind. You make everything harder, Mom. Please just leave before you ruin everything. The worst part wasn't Derek. I expected cruelty from him. The real pain came from Vanessa, from the child I carried inside me for 9 months. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she believed I could protect her from anything. Now she was the one I needed protection from. Eventually, I reached for my purse to find a tissue. That's when I noticed the envelope. At first, I thought it was just a napkin someone shoved into my bag by accident, but when I pulled it out, I immediately recognized Linda's handwriting across the front. Ruth, please read this alone. A strange chill ran through me. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a thick stack of folded photocopied documents, legal forms. I frowned in confusion and turned on the small overhead light in the car. The first page made my stomach drop instantly. Durable power of atom. My name sat at the top. Below it, in cold legal language, the document stated that Vanessa Carter would receive authority to make financial decisions on my behalf if I became mentally or physically incapable. My pulse quickened. What is this? I flipped to the next page. Medical authorization. Another page. Trust transfer preparation documents. Then another. Authorization for property access. Emergency account oversight. Temporary healthcare authority. Each page felt more horrifying than the last. And then I saw it. My signature. Or something trying very hard to look like my signature. I stopped breathing. The document slipped slightly in my hands as panic crawled through my body. No. 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 I had never signed these papers. Not one of them. I grabbed the page closer, staring at the signature under the dim car light. It looked almost right. Close enough to fool someone who didn't know me well. But I knew my own handwriting. The R in Ruth always curved slightly upward at the end because of an old hand injury from my 20s. This signature didn't. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Suddenly, Linda's warning echoed in my head. Whatever happens next, don't sign anything. Oh my God, the dinner, the accusations, the humiliation. It wasn't random. It was connected to this. My phone suddenly rang so loudly I nearly screamed. Linda, I answered immediately. Linda. Are you alone? She asked sharply. Yes. Good. Listen carefully to me. My voice shook violently. What are these papers? I took pictures of them when Derek left his bag open near the table before you arrived. I closed my eyes. You knew I suspected something, she said, but I didn't realize how bad it was until tonight. Tears filled my eyes again. They think I'm losing my mind. No, Linda snapped. They want other people to think that. The distinction hit me like ice water. I swallowed hard. Why? Linda went quiet for a moment. Then she said the sentence I had secretly feared for months. Because of your house, Ruth. I stared blankly through the windshield. What Derek's drowning financially? A cold knot formed in my stomach. How do you know that my friend Carol works at the same bank branch Derek uses? Linda lowered her voice further. Apparently there have been loan problems. Debt. Missed payments. Pieces started clicking together in my mind. The constant financial questions, the obsession with wills and trusts, the pressure about planning ahead. My breathing became shallow. You think this is about money? I think Derek's trying to gain control over your assets. I looked back down at the documents with horror. That's impossible. Is it? I couldn't answer, because deep down I already knew. Linda continued carefully. Ruth, if someone can convince people you're mentally unstable, these documents become much easier to push through. I covered my mouth with my hand. The room at the restaurant suddenly made terrible sense now. The public confrontation, the accusations, the witnesses, they weren't just humiliating me. They were building a story, a narrative. The grieving widow becoming emotionally unstable, the exhausted daughter trying to help, the caring son-in-law stepping in to protect the family. My God! The realization hit so hard my entire body went cold. They planned this, I whispered. Linda didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said quietly, Yes, I think they did. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear traffic moving faintly outside. People living normal lives while mine quietly collapsed. Then another memory surfaced suddenly. 3 months earlier. Derek had come by my house unexpectedly while Vanessa was running errands. We sat at the kitchen table while he explained some insurance paperwork he claimed Vanessa wanted me to review someday. At the time, I barely looked at it. I trusted him. God help me, I trusted him. You remember when Derek brought those papers to my house? I asked slowly. Linda cursed under her breath. What papers? He said they were insurance forms. Did you sign anything? I don't think so. You don't think so? My chest tightened. He flipped through pages quickly. I initialed something at the bottom because he said it was only confirming beneficiary information. Ruth. Fear exploded through me fully then. I grabbed the documents again, searching frantically through the stack. Some pages were incomplete. Others had blank spaces. But suddenly I recognized one section. My initials. Real ones this time. Oh my God. What I signed part of something. Linda went silent. I could barely breathe now. My own trust in my family had become a weapon against me. And the worst part, I still didn't know how involved Vanessa truly was. Had she known all along, or had Derek manipulated her into this too? My mind replayed her tears at the restaurant. They looked real. But so did her betrayal. Come stay with me tonight, Linda said firmly. I can't. Yes, you can. I need to go home. No. Her voice hardened. Do not go home alone tonight. Fear flickered through me again. You think they'd come there? I think you need to stop underestimating how serious this may be. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. The exhaustion was overwhelming now. Emotional exhaustion. Physical exhaustion. Soul-deep exhaustion. At 62 years old, I suddenly felt ancient. Not because of age, because of shock. Linda. I whispered weakly, How did my life become this? Her voice softened immediately. You trusted the wrong people. That's not a crime. Fresh tears slid down my face. The restaurant doors opened in the distance then. I looked up instinctively. Vanessa stepped outside alone. Even from far away, I could tell she was crying. For one terrible second, maternal instinct almost overpowered everything else. I nearly opened the car door, nearly ran toward her, nearly comforted the daughter who had publicly destroyed me less than an hour earlier. That's what motherhood does. Even broken hearts still reach for their children. But then Derek appeared behind her. He said something sharply. Vanessa immediately straightened. and I watched him guide her back inside with one hand pressed firmly against her back, controlling, directing, managing. A horrible realization settled over me then. This wasn't over, not even close. Whatever happened at that dinner was only the first move, and for the first time in my life, I realized I might actually be in danger from my own family. I barely slept that night. Linda made me stay in her guest room, though I spent most of the hours sitting upright against the headboard staring at the wall while my thoughts spiraled endlessly. Every memory of Vanessa felt poisoned now. Every family dinner, every hug, every "I love you, Mom." Around 3 a.m, I finally got out of bed and walked quietly into Linda's kitchen for water. The house was dark except for the faint yellow stove light she always left on overnight. I stood there trembling slightly, trying to steady my breathing. That's when my phone buzzed. Vanessa! My heart jumped so hard it physically hurt. For one foolish second, I thought maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd finally escaped Derek's influence. Maybe my daughter was still in there somewhere. My hands shook as I answered. Vanessa, silence. Then muffled movement. I frowned. Hello? Still nothing. But I could hear voices faintly in the background. The line hadn't disconnected. She must have called accidentally. I almost hung up. Then I heard Derek. Sharp. Angry. You completely lost control in there tonight. I froze instantly. Vanessa's voice came next, weak and shaky. She's still my mother. My stomach tightened. Derek laughed coldly. Not if she signs those documents first. I stopped breathing. The room suddenly felt freezing cold around me. Vanessa lowered her voice, but I could still hear the panic underneath it. She looked devastated. That was the point. The glass in my hand nearly slipped. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I might faint. This was real. Every horrifying suspicion, every fear, all of it. Planned. Intentional. Derek continued pacing somewhere near the phone. If Ruth keeps thinking emotionally instead of rationally, this drags out longer. You promised we weren't hurting her. Oh, grow up, Vanessa. We need leverage. Leverage. He was talking about me like I was a business transaction. My chest tightened so painfully I had to grip the counter. Vanessa began crying softly. I hate this. You hate debt more. Silence followed that sentence. Heavy silence. Then Derek spoke again, quieter this time. You know what happens if we lose the house. My mind raced. House! Their house. More debt than Linda even knew about. Vanessa sounded exhausted. I just wanted things to get better. And they will, Derek replied smoothly. Once your mother signs the medical authority forms, everything becomes easier. My entire body went numb. Medical authority. Dear God. He wasn't only after money. He wanted control. Complete control. Then came the sentence that shattered me completely. We need her emotionally broken enough to stop fighting us. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. Broken enough. Not persuaded. Not helped. Broken. Tears burned down my face silently while I listened to my son-in-law discuss destroying me psychologically like it was some strategic business plan. Vanessa whispered something I almost couldn't hear. What if she cuts us off? Derek scoffed. She won't. Women like Ruth always come back. Guilt controls them. I physically recoiled. Women like Ruth. As if kindness was stupidity. As if love was weakness. As if motherhood itself made me easy to manipulate. The line shifted suddenly, footsteps moving closer. I panicked and ended the call immediately. For several seconds, I just stood there shaking violently in Linda's kitchen. Then I slid slowly to the floor. I don't think I cried right away this time. The pain had moved somewhere deeper than tears. It settled into my bones. My daughter knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not every forged document. Maybe not every detail. But she knew enough. Enough to stay silent while Derek humiliated me publicly. Enough to let me believe I was losing my family because I was too emotional. Enough to watch me break apart in front of strangers. And somehow that hurt even worse than outright hatred, because I could hear it in her voice. Vanessa wasn't evil. She was weak. Weak enough to betray me. Weak enough to let the wrong man reshape her into someone I no longer recognized. A floorboard creaked behind me. Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing her robe. One look at my face and she rushed over immediately. "What happened?" I handed her the phone silently. I heard them. Her expression darkened instantly. What did they say? I repeated everything slowly. Every word. Every sentence. By the end, Linda looked furious enough to break something. That son of a bitch! I wrapped my arms around myself tightly. She knew Linda. Linda crouched beside me carefully. She sounded scared. She still did it. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I whispered the question that had been haunting me for hours. Did I fail as a mother? Linda grabbed my hand immediately. No. But she became this. She became manipulated. I stared blankly ahead. I raised her to be kind, and kind people can still make terrible choices. That sentence stayed with me, because deep down I knew Linda was right. Life isn't divided neatly into monsters and saints. Sometimes people destroy you while crying the entire time. That's what made this so unbearable. Vanessa wasn't enjoying my pain, but she was still participating in it. Around sunrise, Linda made coffee while I sat silently at her kitchen table staring at the growing daylight outside. Everything felt different now. The world itself looked unfamiliar, like I'd crossed into some darker version of my life overnight. Linda finally sat across from me. You need a lawyer immediately, I nodded slowly. Daniel Reeves. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Harold's attorney. Yes. Daniel had handled Harold's will years earlier. He was one of the few people Harold trusted completely. More importantly, Derek didn't know how close Daniel still was to our family. Linda leaned forward seriously. Ruth, listen carefully to me. I looked up. You cannot keep thinking like a mother right now. The words stung because they were true. You need to think like someone protecting herself. I swallowed hard. I don't even know how. Yes, you do. No, I whispered. All I know how to do is love my daughter. Linda's face softened briefly. And that's exactly what Derek is counting on. Silence settled between us again. Then suddenly my phone started vibrating repeatedly against the table. Vanessa. Again. Then immediately after Derek. Then Vanessa again. 3 calls in less than a minute. I stared at the screen while dread crawled through me. Before tonight, seeing my daughter's name used to bring comfort. Now, it brought fear. Another text appeared. Mom, please answer. Then another. You left your medication here. I frowned instantly. Medication? I didn't take any medication except occasional vitamins. Linda noticed too. What medication? A horrible realization flashed through my mind. At the restaurant, Derek had loudly mentioned mood swings, forgetfulness, emotional instability. Now suddenly there were medications. My blood went cold again. Oh my God. What, they're building a narrative. Linda grabbed the phone from my hand and read the messages carefully. Her face hardened. Do not respond. Another text appeared immediately afterward. We're worried about you. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they sounded caring, because now I understood how dangerous fake concern could be. That was the moment something inside me finally shifted. Not healed, not hardened completely, but awakened. For the first time since Harold died, I stopped worrying about protecting everyone else's feelings, because suddenly I understood something terrifying. If I didn't start protecting myself now, I might lose far more than my dignity. I might lose my entire life. By 9 o'clock the next morning, I no longer felt like the same woman who had walked into that birthday dinner. Something inside me had cracked open during the night. Not weakness, clarity. For years I had spent my life trying to keep peace inside my family. I ignored uncomfortable feelings. I excused behavior that hurt me. I convinced myself that love meant endless patience. But sitting at Linda's kitchen table with Derek's messages flooding my phone, I finally understood something I should have learned a long time ago. Love without boundaries becomes permission for people to destroy you. Linda drove me to attorney Daniel Reeves's office just after 10. The law office sat inside an old red brick building downtown, the same place Harold and I had visited years earlier to prepare our wills after his cancer diagnosis. Walking through those familiar doors made my chest ache. Harold used to squeeze my hand every time legal paperwork overwhelmed me. Don't worry, he'd whisper. I'll handle the complicated parts. Now I was alone. Or at least I thought I was until Daniel stepped into the lobby. Ruth. The moment he saw my face, his expression changed completely. Daniel Reeves had aged gracefully into the kind of older man people trusted immediately. Calm eyes, steady voice, the sort of presence that made chaos feel manageable. He hurried toward me. My God. What happened? That simple question nearly made me cry again, because for the first time since the dinner, someone sounded genuinely concerned instead of strategically concerned. Linda answered before I could. She's in trouble. Daniel ushered us into his office immediately and closed the door behind us. What kind of trouble? I handed him the copied documents with shaking hands. The moment he saw the signatures, his face darkened. Where did you get these? Linda found them. Daniel adjusted his glasses carefully and studied each page in silence. The room became painfully quiet except for the ticking wall clock. Finally, he looked up. These signatures are inconsistent. A wave of relief mixed with terror moved through me. So I'm not crazy, Ruth, he said firmly. You were never crazy. The words hit harder than I expected, because somewhere deep down, after hours of accusations and manipulation, part of me had started doubting myself. That's what gaslighting does. It plants confusion where certainty used to live. Daniel continued flipping through the paperwork. Then suddenly he stopped. His expression sharpened. When did you sign this? He pointed toward a page containing my real initials. I swallowed hard. A few months ago, Derek said it was insurance paperwork. Daniel muttered something under his breath I couldn't hear. What? He mixed valid initials into incomplete legal drafts. Linda swore loudly beside me. Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. This appears intentional. The room spun slightly. Intentional. Not misunderstanding. Not confusion. Fraud. My hands turned ice cold. What do I do? Daniel's entire tone shifted then from concerned friend to experienced attorney. First, we protect you immediately." For the next 2 hours, Daniel moved through paperwork methodically while explaining everything carefully. We revoked every prior authorization connected to my accounts, canceled all temporary financial access permissions, flagged suspicious legal activity, updated emergency medical contacts, locked changes on my property records. Daniel even contacted my bank personally while I sat there listening in stunned silence. At one point, he lowered the phone and looked directly at me. "Has anyone pressured you recently regarding your mental health?" I almost laughed from disbelief. "Yes." "How public was it?" I hesitated, then quietly answered my birthday dinner. Daniel closed his eyes briefly like he was trying not to lose his temper. "Describe exactly what happened." So I did. Every humiliating detail. The accusations. The witnesses. The documents. Vanessa crying. Derek controlling the conversation. As I spoke, I watched Daniel's face grow more serious by the minute. When I finished, he folded his hands together slowly. "That dinner wasn't emotional," he said. "It was strategic." The sentence sent chills through my body despite already knowing it. Daniel continued carefully. "If someone intended to challenge your competency later, a public incident like that creates witnesses." Linda slammed her hand against the desk. "I knew it." I stared blankly ahead. "They were building evidence." "Yes." My stomach turned violently. Suddenly, I remembered the waitress near the restaurant door whispering, "I'm so sorry." Even strangers had seen me as the unstable, emotional older woman being managed by her concerned family. Derek had staged the entire thing perfectly. I felt sick. Daniel leaned toward me gently. "Ruth, I need to ask something difficult." I nodded weakly. "Do you believe your daughter fully understands what her husband is doing?" That question hurt more than everything else combined, because I honestly didn't know anymore. I think... My voice cracked. "I think she knows pieces of it." Daniel exchanged a look with Linda. "That may matter later." Later? The word terrified me, because suddenly this no longer felt like family drama. It felt like war. Around noon, my phone started ringing again. Vanessa. Then immediately Derek. Then Vanessa again. Daniel held out his hand. "Don't answer." I handed him the phone without hesitation. He studied the screen. "They're panicking." Linda crossed her arms. "Good." Another message appeared. "Mom, where are you?" Then, "We're worried sick." Then please come home so we can talk calmly. I stared at those texts with numb disbelief. Home. As if nothing had happened. As if humiliating me publicly and attempting to manipulate legal control over my life qualified as a misunderstanding. Daniel looked up from the phone carefully. "I strongly advise you not to return home alone yet." That sentence made everything feel terrifyingly real. "I can't stay away forever." "No," Daniel agreed. "But until we understand the extent of this situation, caution matters." For a moment, the room fell quiet again. Then Daniel said something unexpected. Harold prepared for this possibility. I blinked. Daniel opened a drawer and removed an older folder. Years ago, after his diagnosis, Harold became concerned about elder financial abuse cases. He asked unusual questions during your estate planning. A strange ache filled my chest. "That sounds like him." Daniel nodded softly. He specifically requested additional protections around property transfers and competency challenges. I stared at the folder in shock. Even dying Harold had still been trying to protect me. Fresh tears burned my eyes instantly. Daniel slid one document toward me gently. Your husband trusted your judgment completely, Ruth. That broke something inside me all over again, because after everything Derek and Vanessa had implied, I desperately needed someone to remind me I wasn't helpless. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't incompetent. I was grieving. There's a difference. By late afternoon, Daniel finalized temporary safeguards around my finances and legal records. As we prepared to leave, he looked at me seriously. One more thing. I stopped. If Derek realizes he's losing control, his behavior may escalate. Fear flickered through me. What does that mean? It means manipulative people become unpredictable when desperate. Linda immediately stepped closer beside me. She's staying with me. Daniel nodded approvingly. Good. The drive back to Linda's house felt strangely surreal. The city moved around us normally while my entire life quietly collapsed beneath the surface. At a red light, Linda glanced over suddenly. You okay? I stared out the window for a long moment before answering honestly, no. She squeezed my hand briefly. I know. And for the first time in nearly 24 hours, I finally allowed myself to admit the truth completely. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was afraid of my own daughter's husband. And maybe most painful of all, I was afraid my daughter might choose him over me completely. 3 days after my birthday dinner, Daniel Reeves arranged a formal meeting. Neutral ground. His law office. He insisted everything be documented. People behave differently when there's paperwork involved. He told me quietly over the phone. I knew what he really meant. Manipulative people behave differently when witnesses exist. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. By noon, my stomach was already in knots. I stood in Linda's guest bedroom staring at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. In only a few days, I seemed older somehow, more tired, like betrayal itself physically ages a person. Linda appeared behind me holding a cardigan. You don't have to do this today. Yes, I do. You could let Daniel handle everything. I shook my head slowly. No more hiding. That sentence surprised even me, because for most of my life I avoided confrontation whenever possible. I was the peacemaker, the forgiving one, the woman who apologized first even when she wasn't wrong. But something had changed. Not my love for Vanessa. That still existed painfully beneath everything else. What changed was my willingness to sacrifice myself to keep other people comfortable. I put on the cardigan and took a slow breath. Let's go. The drive to Daniel's office felt unbearably quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while anxiety churned inside me harder with every mile. Part of me still hoped Vanessa would walk in alone. Without Derek. Without manipulation. Without lies. Part of me still hoped my daughter would finally choose me. Hope can survive even after humiliation. That's the cruel thing about mothers. When we arrived, Daniel greeted us immediately. He looked serious. Before they get here, there's something you should know. Fear tightened inside me instantly. What? He lowered his voice. I had my assistant run a deeper review of the notary records attached to those documents. And there are inconsistencies. Linda folded her arms. What kind of inconsistencies? Daniel opened a file carefully. One of the documents was supposedly signed while Ruth was attending a church fundraiser. I frowned. How do you know that? Because the fundraiser date appears in local newspaper photographs. My blood went cold. They forged the date most likely. Another page appeared. Also, one witness signature belongs to a man who died 11 months ago. Even Linda looked stunned. Oh my God. Daniel nodded grimly. This is no longer suspicious behavior. This is potential fraud. Fraud. The word echoed heavily through the room. I sank slowly into the nearest chair. Somewhere deep inside me, I think part of my heart had still been searching for innocent explanations, misunderstandings, pressure, confusion. But dead witnesses don't happen accidentally. My daughter and her husband had crossed into something far darker. A knock sounded at the outer office door. Everyone looked up. Daniel checked his watch. They're here. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might be sick. I hadn't seen Vanessa since the restaurant. Part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to hold her and ask what happened to my little girl. Then the conference room door opened. Derek entered first. Of course he did. Confident. Controlled. Wearing a navy suit like this was some corporate negotiation instead of a family disaster. Vanessa followed behind him slowly. The moment I saw her face, pain pierced straight through me. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, shoulders hunched inward. She looked nothing like the bright, stubborn little girl who used to dance barefoot in our kitchen. For one terrible second, our eyes met, and I saw shame there. Real shame. But Derek immediately stepped slightly in front of her, subtly blocking the moment. Control. Always control. Ruth, he said smoothly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I didn't answer. Daniel gestured toward the chairs. Please sit. Nobody spoke at first. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows, while tension filled every inch of the room. Finally, Derek folded his hands calmly. I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. Linda actually laughed out loud. You publicly humiliated her and tried to steal her assets. Derek's expression barely shifted. No one tried to steal anything. Daniel opened the folder slowly. Then perhaps you can explain the forged signatures. For the first time, Derek's composure flickered. Only slightly, but I saw it. Vanessa looked sharply toward him. What forged signatures? He ignored her completely. Daniel slid several copied pages across the table. These signatures fail verification standards. Derek leaned back calmly. Ruth signed paperwork voluntarily. I absolutely did not. You've been under emotional strain, he replied softly. There it was again, the narrative, the unstable widow, the confused older woman. Except this time I wasn't alone anymore. Daniel spoke immediately. We also identified fraudulent witness information. Now Derek's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Is it Daniel produced another document? One witness was deceased before the alleged signing date. The room went completely silent. Vanessa slowly turned toward her husband. What Derek finally looked irritated. This is being blown out of proportion. No, Daniel said calmly. It's being documented. That sentence changed the energy in the room instantly, because suddenly Derek realized something important. He wasn't controlling the environment anymore. No restaurant audience, no emotional spectacle, no manipulated public perception. Just evidence, paperwork, facts. Vanessa's breathing quickened. Derek, what is he talking about? Derek rubbed his forehead dramatically. This is exactly why I didn't want attorneys involved. Linda nearly exploded. You forged documents. No one forged anything. Then he looked directly at me again, and suddenly his voice softened into fake concern. Ruth, you've been grieving heavily for years now. Sometimes memory becomes unreliable under stress. The cruelty of that sentence stunned even me. using Harold's death against me, reducing my grief into supposed mental weakness. I felt anger rise for the first time stronger than sadness. "You don't get to weaponize my husband's death," I said quietly. Derek opened his mouth again, but Daniel interrupted him sharply. "Enough!" The room fell silent. Daniel folded his hands carefully. "There's another issue we need to discuss." He pressed a button on the conference table speaker. Then suddenly a familiar voice filled the room. Derek's voice. "You completely lost control in there tonight." Vanessa froze instantly. My heart pounded. The voicemail. Daniel had recorded and preserved it legally after I shared it with him. The recording continued. "She's still my mother. Not if she signs those documents first." Vanessa's face went white. Derek lunged forward immediately. "Turn that off!" But Daniel didn't move. "We need her emotionally broken enough to stop fighting us." The room became deathly still. Even the rain outside seemed quieter somehow. Vanessa looked at Derek like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Oh my God," she whispered. Derek stood abruptly. "This recording lacks context." Linda snapped back immediately. "What context makes that sentence acceptable?" Vanessa began shaking. "You said you were helping her." Derek's expression darkened instantly. "I was helping us. Us. Not her. Not family. Not love. Just survival. Financial survival. Emotional control. Manipulation." And finally, for the first time since this nightmare began, I watched certainty crack across my daughter's face. Not certainty about me, about him. Daniel slid another document across the table. "There's also evidence of unusual withdrawals connected to shared financial accounts." Vanessa blinked rapidly. What withdrawals? Derek's silence answered before anyone else could. And in that moment, I watched my daughter realize something horrifying. She hadn't just helped betray me. She had been used too. The silence after the recording ended felt unbearable. Vanessa stared at Derek like she no longer recognized the man sitting beside her. I knew that feeling. I'd been living inside it for days. "What withdrawals?" she whispered again. Derek rubbed both hands over his face slowly like he was the exhausted victim in all of this. "Vanessa, not here." "No." Her voice cracked sharply. "Right here." Daniel remained silent wisely. So did Linda. We all understood something important was happening. For the first time since this nightmare began, Derek was losing control of the room. Vanessa turned toward Daniel with trembling hands. "What withdrawals?" Daniel opened another folder carefully. There were several transfers over the last 18 months connected to joint financial accounts. Vanessa frowned weakly. "That's impossible. We barely had enough money to cover our mortgage." Derek immediately cut in. "We discussed this already." "No, you discussed it," she snapped suddenly. The sharpness in her voice startled everyone, including Derek. Vanessa's breathing grew uneven as Daniel slid several printed bank statements across the table. I watched her eyes move down the pages, then widen. $30,000, $15,000, $8,000. Large withdrawals, repeatedly. Some transferred into accounts I didn't recognize. One payment labeled simply Consulting Holdings LLC. Vanessa looked up slowly. "What is this?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Business restructuring. You told me your company was downsizing. It was complicated." "No," Vanessa whispered. "You lied to me." The room felt painfully tense. Rain still tapped softly against the windows while my daughter's marriage quietly collapsed in front of all of us. And despite everything she'd done to me, part of my heart still hurt for her. Because I could see it happening in real time. The moment illusion dies, the moment love turns into fear, the moment you realize the person beside you has been manipulating your reality for years. Derek leaned toward her carefully. "Vanessa, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down." His eyes flickered briefly toward me then. Anger. Blame. Like this unraveling was somehow my fault. But the truth was finally too visible to hide anymore. Vanessa looked back at the statements again. Then suddenly her face crumpled. "Oh my God." Daniel spoke gently now. "We also found evidence of several denied loans tied to your home." Vanessa stared blankly ahead. "You said we were fine." Derek finally lost patience. "Because I was trying to keep us fine." "There it is," Linda muttered quietly beside me. Vanessa turned toward him slowly. "You used my mother. No, I protected our future. You humiliated her." She would have signed eventually if she stopped being emotional. The moment the sentence left his mouth, even Derek seemed to realize how terrible it sounded. Vanessa recoiled physically. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. Emotional. That word. Used like a weapon against women for generations. Grief becomes instability. Pain becomes irrationality. Boundaries become cruelty. And suddenly I realized Derek never truly saw me as a person at all. Only an obstacle. Vanessa stood abruptly from her chair. "I can't breathe." She rushed toward the conference room door. For 1 second, maternal instinct overpowered everything again. I almost stood to follow her, but I stopped myself. Because something inside me finally understood that rescuing Vanessa from every painful consequence was part of how we ended up here in the first place. Daniel quietly excused himself and stepped outside after her. The remaining silence felt suffocating. Then Derek looked directly at me. "You're enjoying this?" I stared at him in disbelief. Enjoying what you finally turned her against me? A strange calm settled over me then, because for the first time I could see him clearly too. Not powerful, not charming, just desperate. A desperate man losing control. "You did that yourself," I said quietly. His face hardened instantly. "You have no idea what pressure does to people." I thought about that carefully, because maybe he was right. Pressure does reveal people, and under pressure, Derek chose fraud, manipulation, cruelty. Under pressure, Vanessa chose silence. And under pressure, I was finally learning to choose myself. Daniel returned several minutes later. Vanessa followed slowly behind him, eyes swollen red. She didn't sit beside Derek this time. She chose the chair farthest from him instead. That small movement broke my heart more than yelling would have. Because distance inside a marriage is never really about chairs. It's about trust dying. Daniel folded his hands carefully. "I think we need honesty now." Nobody answered. He looked directly at Vanessa. "Did you know about the forged documents?" She immediately shook her head. "No." Derek scoffed under his breath. Vanessa ignored him completely. "I knew Derek wanted Mom to sign some planning paperwork eventually," she whispered. "But I didn't know signatures were being copied." I believed her. Oddly enough, I did. Not because she deserved automatic trust anymore, but because her devastation looked real. Daniel nodded slowly. "Did you know about the public competency narrative?" Vanessa covered her face instantly. Fresh tears slipped through her fingers. "Yes." The word sliced through me anyway. Even expecting it didn't soften the pain. She looked toward me finally, and the guilt in her expression nearly broke me. "Mom," she whispered shakily. I swear, I never thought it would go that far. I said nothing. Because honestly, I didn't trust myself to speak yet. Vanessa wiped her eyes desperately. At first, Derek only said you needed more support. She swallowed hard. Then he started talking about protecting your finances, making sure people didn't take advantage of you. Linda muttered darkly. That's rich. Vanessa continued like she barely heard her. He kept saying you were lonely, vulnerable, that eventually strangers or scammers would manipulate you. I stared at her quietly. So instead you decided your husband should manipulate me first. The question shattered her completely. She burst into tears instantly. I know how horrible this is. Do you? Yes, she cried. Every day for months, I knew something felt wrong. Derek suddenly interrupted sharply. Vanessa, stop talking. She flinched automatically. That tiny reaction told me more than words ever could. Fear. Not respect. Fear. Vanessa looked at him with trembling disbelief. You said this was temporary. Because it was. You said once the paperwork was done, things would calm down. They would have. I stared at him coldly. You mean once you controlled my life? He didn't answer. And that silence was answer enough. Vanessa shook her head repeatedly now like she was trying to wake herself from a nightmare. I became someone I don't recognize anymore. That sentence landed heavily in the room because it was true, not just for her, for all of us. Trauma changes people. Betrayal changes families. There is no clean return to who you were before. Vanessa looked toward me again. I was drowning, Mom. I finally spoke softly. Then why didn't you come to me? That question seemed to hurt her more than anything else. Because I was ashamed. The honesty in her voice made my chest ache. She took a shaky breath. He kept telling me we were failing financially because I wasn't strong enough. Derek rolled his eyes slightly. Oh, please. No. Vanessa snapped suddenly. You don't get to dismiss this anymore. For the first time, I heard anger in her voice directed at him instead of herself. And strangely, it made me sad rather than relieved, because it came too late. So much damage had already been done. Vanessa turned back toward me, crying openly now. I know you may never forgive me. I looked at my daughter carefully. The child I raised, the woman who betrayed me, the frightened person trapped somewhere between victim and accomplice. And the hardest truth of all settled painfully into my heart. Sometimes the people we love most become both. By the following week, the entire family had fractured into pieces. Secrets have a way of spreading faster than truth, especially ugly ones. Some relatives heard only parts of the story and immediately chose sides. Others avoided me altogether because family scandals make people uncomfortable. It's easier for them to disappear than confront betrayal directly. Aunt Patricia called Linda and said maybe the situation had been blown out of proportion. Jordan sent me a short text apologizing for staying silent at the restaurant. Elaine mailed me flowers with a card that simply read, I should have defended you. I'm sorry, but the deepest damage wasn't happening around the family. It was happening inside Vanessa. After the meeting at Daniel's office, she left Derek and checked into a small extended-stay hotel near the interstate. At least temporarily. That's what she told me in a voicemail I listened to 3 days later but never answered. I just need space to think, she said weakly through tears. I sat in Linda's living room listening to that message over and over. Not because it fixed anything, because hearing my daughter cry still hurt me instinctively, even after everything, especially after everything. Linda hated that part of me. He weaponized your compassion, she said one evening while folding laundry angrily, and Vanessa helped him do it. I know. No, Ruth. You feel guilty for her. I stared down into my tea quietly, because she wasn't entirely wrong. Mothers are strange creatures. We can be destroyed by our children and still worry whether they've eaten dinner. Meanwhile, Daniel moved quickly behind the scenes. Formal fraud complaints were filed. Financial investigators started reviewing the forged documents and suspicious transfers. The notary office connected to several signatures suddenly became unavailable for comment, and Derek stopped pretending to be calm. The first angry voicemail came late Tuesday night. You're destroying this family over paperwork, he snapped. Paperwork. Not betrayal, not fraud, not emotional abuse, just paperwork. I deleted the message immediately. The second voicemail was worse. You think Vanessa's going to forgive you for this? That one sat with me longer than I wanted to admit, because buried underneath the manipulation was something painful and true. This family would never fully recover, no matter what happened next. Some wounds permanently change the shape of love. A few days later, Daniel called with another update. Ruth, I need to prepare you for something. Fear tightened immediately inside me. What now? Derek hired an attorney. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. He's claiming concern over your emotional stability following your husband's death. Even after everything, hearing those words still physically hurt. How can he still say that because desperate people cling to narratives that protect them? Daniel paused carefully. But there's good news too. I waited silently. His financial records are much worse than we originally thought. My stomach tightened. How bad? Significant debt. Hidden accounts. High-interest loans. There are also indications he may have used Vanessa's name on several applications without fully informing her. I sank slowly into the couch. Dear God. The deeper this went, the uglier it became. That evening, Vanessa showed up unexpectedly at Linda's house. I nearly dropped my tea when I saw her standing outside through the front window. She looked exhausted. Not dramatic exhausted. Real exhausted. Like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. Linda immediately crossed her arms. You don't have to let her in. But I already knew I would, because despite everything, she was still my daughter. I opened the door slowly. Vanessa looked at me carefully, almost fearfully. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded small, fragile, not the sharp, angry tone from the restaurant. Just sadness. I stepped aside silently. She entered slowly and stood awkwardly near the couch like she no longer knew whether she belonged in my life. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Vanessa started crying immediately. I'm so sorry. I stayed quiet. Not to punish her, because I genuinely didn't know what to say anymore. She wiped her eyes shakily. I left him, Linda muttered under her breath. About time. Vanessa looked toward her briefly but didn't argue. That alone showed how broken she felt. I found more accounts, she whispered. More debt. I sat down slowly. How much did you know? She collapsed into the chair across from me. Not enough. The answer sounded painfully honest. Vanessa twisted her hands together nervously. He always made me feel like everything was my fault. I listened silently. If bills piled up, it was because I stressed him out. She laughed bitterly through tears. If he yelled, it was because I pushed him too far. Linda's expression softened slightly despite herself. Vanessa continued staring at the floor. I stopped recognizing my own thoughts after a while. That sentence hit me hard, because I remembered feeling something similar after Harold died. Grief can make you emotionally vulnerable, and manipulative people know exactly how to use vulnerability against you. Vanessa looked up finally, but none of that excuses what I did to you. I swallowed hard. No, it doesn't. Fresh tears filled her eyes instantly. I know, the honesty in that room felt heavier than screaming would have. No lies left, no pretending, just damage, raw and undeniable. Vanessa pulled something from her purse carefully. A folded document. I found this hidden in Derek's office. I took it cautiously. The moment I opened it, my chest tightened. It was an earlier draft of the trust paperwork, with handwritten notes. One sentence had been circled heavily in black ink. Emotional instability supports emergency authority transfer. My hands started shaking again. Beneath it, Derek had written, "Need witnesses." My stomach turned violently. The birthday dinner, the public humiliation, the accusations, it really had all been staged as evidence. Vanessa covered her mouth, crying. I didn't know about this part. I believed her, not fully innocent, but not fully aware either. A woman slowly manipulated until morality became blurred beneath fear and dependency. I folded the paper carefully and set it down. Then I looked at my daughter for a very long time. You hurt me more deeply than anyone ever has. Vanessa nodded immediately through tears. I know. There were moments after that dinner where I questioned my own sanity that made her cry harder. I'm sorry. I know you are. And strangely, that was true too. She was sorry. Genuinely. But remorse doesn't magically erase consequences. That's the hardest lesson adulthood teaches us. Sometimes apologies arrive after irreversible damage. Vanessa wiped her face weakly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I looked toward the family photographs on Linda's bookshelf. Pictures of holidays, birthdays, barbecues, entire years filled with people who no longer existed in quite the same way. Then quietly I said the truth that had taken days to fully understand. I may forgive you someday. Vanessa looked up hopefully, but I will never trust blindly again. The sentence visibly broke her heart, and honestly mine too, because boundaries sound empowering in theory, but when they're built against your own child, they feel more like grief. A week later, I officially updated my will, not out of revenge. That surprised even Linda. I didn't remove Vanessa entirely, but Daniel created a protected trust structure around my assets, healthcare decisions, and property rights. Safeguards, oversight, protection against future manipulation. When I signed the final documents, Daniel looked at me gently. You're doing the right thing. Maybe. But it still felt unbearably sad, because no mother dreams of legally protecting herself from her own daughter, and yet somehow that had become my reality. 6 months after my birthday dinner, I finally slept through an entire night without waking up anxious. That may not sound important to some people, but after betrayal rewires your nervous system, peace becomes something you notice in tiny moments. A full night's sleep, a quiet cup of coffee, an afternoon without fear sitting heavy in your chest. Healing doesn't arrive dramatically. It returns slowly, almost shyly. By autumn, the legal investigation into Derek was still ongoing. Several fraud-related charges had been filed, though Daniel warned me these things often moved painfully slowly. I no longer asked for updates every day. At some point, I realized I didn't want my entire identity trapped inside what happened to me. For months, I had existed only as the woman betrayed by her family. I needed to become Ruth again. So little by little, I rebuilt pieces of my life. I returned to the community library twice a week to volunteer reading to children. The first day back nearly made me cry. A little girl with missing front teeth climbed into my lap, holding a picture book, and asked if I could do the funny voices. And for 30 beautiful minutes, I forgot everything else. No fraud, no betrayal, no legal documents, just stories and laughter. I started attending a grief support group again too, not because I was still grieving Harold exactly the same way, but because I finally understood something important. I had been grieving more than my husband. I had been grieving the version of my family I thought existed. Those are two different losses. Linda remained my anchor through all of it. She never sugar-coated reality, which oddly became comforting. One afternoon, while we planted mums in her backyard, she glanced at me sideways and said, "You look stronger." I smiled faintly. "I feel sadder." That too. The honesty made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Real laughter, not forced politeness, not survival laughter, actual joy. It startled both of us. Vanessa and I spoke occasionally by then, very occasionally. Short phone calls, careful conversations, fragile territory. Trust after betrayal isn't rebuilt through apologies. It's rebuilt through consistency, and consistency takes time. At first, she wrote me letters instead of calling, real handwritten letters. Some were only 2 pages, others were 10. In one of them, she admitted something that stayed with me for a long time. I think part of why Derek manipulated me so easily is because I confused love with obedience. I read that sentence over and over, because I understood it more than she realized. Women from our generation were often taught to keep peace at any cost, to tolerate, to excuse, to endure. Sometimes we pass those lessons down to our daughters without meaning to, and sometimes those daughters grow into women who mistake control for commitment. Vanessa started therapy shortly after leaving Derek. At first, I worried she was only doing it out of guilt. But slowly, I noticed changes, real ones. She stopped making excuses for him, stopped minimizing her choices, stopped asking me to move on. Instead, she listened. One afternoon, she came to Linda's house carrying a cardboard box. "I found some of Dad's things in storage," she said softly. Inside were Harold's old records photographs and handwritten recipe cards he used to keep tucked inside cookbooks. For a moment, we both just stared at the box quietly. Then Vanessa whispered, "I almost let someone destroy the last safe thing we had." I looked at her carefully. "You didn't destroy everything." Tears filled her eyes instantly, but I came close. Yes, she did. Healing required honesty about that too. Not denial, not pretending. Real accountability. By winter, I finally returned home. My house felt different after months away, smaller somehow, quieter, but not haunted anymore. Daniel had helped install additional legal protections around the property and financial records. Security cameras were added too, though I hated needing them. Still, something surprising happened once I moved back. Instead of fear, I felt relief. This was still my home. Harold's chair still sat near the fireplace. The tulips still bloomed beside the mailbox. The kitchen still smelled faintly like cinnamon no matter how much cleaning I did. Trauma had entered my life, but it hadn't stolen everything. That mattered. A week before my 63rd birthday, Vanessa called unexpectedly. "Mom." "Yes." Her voice sounded nervous. "I was wondering if maybe we could have dinner together next week." I went quiet. Not because I was angry, because I suddenly realized how much that question terrified both of us. Last year's birthday had destroyed our family. Now even the idea of another birthday carried emotional weight. Vanessa spoke quickly after my silence stretched too long. It doesn't have to be anything big. I looked around my quiet living room, then softly asked, "Just us, no Derek," she said immediately. The firmness in her voice told me everything I needed to know about how much she'd changed. After a long pause, I answered carefully, "Okay." The dinner happened at Linda's house. Not a fancy restaurant, no private room, no expensive wine, just homemade lasagna, soft music, and people who finally understood how dangerous false appearances can be. Linda cooked while complaining loudly the entire time. "You two are lucky I love you." Vanessa actually smiled a little, and seeing that nearly broke my heart again. Because for the first time in over a year, I saw glimpses of my daughter returning. Not fully healed, not fully trusted, but returning. After dinner, Linda brought out a small birthday cake from the grocery store. Nothing elegant. The frosting leaned sideways slightly. One candle sat crooked in the middle. But when they started singing Happy Birthday, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel manipulated. I felt safe, truly safe. And suddenly tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Vanessa noticed immediately. "Mom." I shook my head softly. "No, honey. It's okay." I looked around the room carefully. At my sister. At my daughter. At the quiet warmth of an imperfect evening. Then I whispered the truth out loud for the first time. This is the first birthday I've had in years where I finally feel safe. Vanessa started crying instantly. Linda handed me a napkin dramatically. "Oh Lord, now everybody's crying again." We laughed through tears together. And although our family would never fully return to what it once was, I finally understood something important. Healing doesn't mean pretending nothing broke. Healing means learning how to live honestly after it does. After everything that happened, I learned that the most dangerous betrayals rarely come from strangers. They come from the people we love enough to trust completely. For a long time, I believed being a good mother meant endless sacrifice, endless forgiveness, and endless understanding. But life taught me something different. Love without boundaries can slowly destroy you. What happened to me forced me to understand that protecting yourself is not cruelty, saying no is not selfish. And even at 62 years old, I still had the right to demand dignity, honesty, and peace in my own life. I also learned that people are rarely entirely good or entirely evil. My daughter hurt me deeply, and some wounds may never disappear completely. But I also saw how fear manipulation and emotional dependence can slowly turn people into strangers, even to themselves. Most importantly, I learned healing is possible. Not perfect healing, not magical healing. Real healing. The kind that comes slowly through truth, boundaries, forgiveness, and self-respect. Now I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Could you forgive someone who betrayed you like that? Share your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments, because your stories may help someone else feel less alone tonight. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue sharing these emotional journeys together.